what is this actual tool that you can use over and over and over and over again and come back to actually changing your life, not just saying it or talking about it or listening to a podcast, but how is my life different? And that's what I hope to deliver. I kind of knew it like subconsciously, but when I read the words, I was like, oh, this just makes sense that anything I'm afraid of, I should do. You are able to discover what your fear is, and then you get to the root of it. And then I give you a step-by-step process to essentially reprogram that or repurpose it.
And so when you get to that base fear, you say it's connected to survival. Is it the person sees it and says, oh, actually, I've been telling myself that this is dependent upon my survival, and it actually isn't. So it dissolves the story around it?
It literally can just like dissolve. Our mind is protecting us from something. My favorite question to ask, like, what would you rather believe? Is then you can actually choose that belief. And the thing that most people don't realize is that your mind is actually proving and looking and collecting the evidence to prove whatever belief you have is true. So that's essentially what fear alchemy is disproving what is true and remembering what is true. Alchemizing your fear. Because I believe fear reveals where you're not free. Where do I feel fear? Boom, that's where I'm not free yet. And then I use that to alchemize it to there or remember that I am.
Where do you want fear alchemy and the rest of what you're here to do? Where do you see that going?
I have this feeling and this vision of waking up and seeing so many people sign up for it that I'm just like bawling. What does that mean when all these people are equipped to free themselves from fear? Ooh, I'm just getting goosebumps, dude. That's the dream.
Benny Harris. Whereas Peyton says Obi-Wan.
I wore this for her today.
She's going to be so stoked.
Just so you guys, because it was like just over a year ago when I met her. I think, was that the same day I met you at Sun Life and then they came later?
I don't know.
I can't remember, but then.
It was in the fall though, yeah.
Yeah, and then I was wearing this, but I wasn't wearing a shirt underneath.
That's right. It was nice out.
It was a little chilly. But anyway, so I wore this in honor of the anniversary.
I love it.
And she didn't know, but Obi-Wan's name is Ben.
She didn't know that. I knew that. Yeah, Ben Kenobi.
Mm-hmm.
I just lost she was intending to give a present for Kingston, but she had to leave this morning to attend a birth. She's a birth doula. So
even better.
Yeah, last night I'm like, I'm podcasting with Ben tomorrow. She's like, oh, great. Like when we get home, like I'm sure I've got like a cool little baby something. So that's coming.
So we appreciate it.
That's coming down the pipe. You're a new father.
I am a new father.
July 4th.
Yes, July 4th. He squeaked. Is that a word? Squeaked in at 11:43 p.m.
Oh, just got in.
Just got in to be a freedom baby.
Yes. And we were talking about this a little bit before we started, but dude, how much has your life changed since July?
Yeah, it's completely transformed, not in the way that I was told it was going to. Meaning is, of course, like, I remember like people told me all these things, like, you're not going to sleep, get ready for like sleepless nights, get ready, essentially just get ready like to lose your freedom, to not be able to do anything ever again. Essentially just like, yes, it's going to be cool, but at the same time, I guess people just like to tell you what will suck.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
And so like, luckily me and Belle, we like to do things differently, or at least stay open to different possibilities. And it's been exactly that. Like it's actually been, it just feels like us is the best way that I can say it. Like, fortunately, we both want it and desire it. And it's something that fits our personalities and it fits our relationship and family unit. So it's not, it essentially, he just plugged in. There was already a place for him there. And now it just feels like, oh yeah, this is what it's supposed to be like.
Yeah. And it's, we were talking about this before, but one of the things that we didn't kind of chat about was, I know when we were having kids, Jake is now 19. There's a big emphasis on reading all the baby books and like really almost getting very cognitive about it. And I'm not saying that, Peyton relied on that heavily. She very intuitive as a person, as a woman, as a mother. I'm guessing you and Belle are probably done a little bit of research here and there, but really have allowed for like the natural process to take over.
That's actually exactly what it's been. It's like we stay in tune to what's like quote unquote the smart thing to do. Like we're always learning and like researching new things. And then we say, does it fit for us? Does it work for him? But honestly, yeah, it's just been a big intuitive game. Like it's been really cool. Like we literally just listen to him. And even I'm able to like, I know this cry as he's hungry, this cry is he's tired, this cry, like he's really comfortable by himself, which I'm appreciative of. Like he just chills and he talks a lot. Now he's 3.5 months. And then he's like, he lets out a certain talk and he's like, I'm done. And then we pick him up and do whatever.
Dude.
So of course, like there's still like, yeah, he cries and we can't figure it out. but it's
Yeah.
like, but it's because he's still a baby. But for the most part, it's been pretty smooth, which I'm grateful for.
And you're not panicking because it's a different cry, and I can imagine, back when we were raising kids, there was this big push on sleep training, and it was like, ugh, by the time we had Hope, who was our third, we were like, fuck that, letting him cry it out. And so Hope, I want to say, slept with us for maybe the first year. And that just felt really good, that she wasn't kind of on her own little island like the boys were to some degree, and letting them soothe themselves. And I'm sure there are ways to get at that. Again, I'm not up on the research today, but I know that it felt way better having Hope in our bed.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it just depends and it depends on the kid and like just being, again, like in tune to like what they need and want. And so it's like, yeah, like it really is just like it's a mix. It's a nuanced game. It's not just like this works for every kid. And so do it every single time.
Yeah. 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 And again, for me, when we were having kids, I was in a completely different place than I am today. And I love seeing, children being born into a family like you and Belle who've done a lot of your own work. And so that you get to really guide this being in a different way. We were chatting about this idea that as parents, you're just trying to survive those years because you're not sleeping and you're doing a lot of different things that you're not really accustomed to. And when you haven't spent the time to do your own work, that it's just a survival energetic that is being imprinted on the kid, unfortunately. And I don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole because I don't know the imprint with my own kids, but I do know that we would do it differently today because we just, we understand the world much differently.
Yeah. And one thing that I've even learned and I expected, but of course you don't know until you do it. And I have words to it now is he is such a great reflection of me in the sense that like any relationship, right, is a mirror. And one thing I've noticed is like when he like just cries and cries and cries, I'm uncomfortable with it. And so that means I'm uncomfortable with crying. I'm uncomfortable with my own emotions. I'm like, that's an opportunity to reparent myself. And once I knew that, it's like now been a couple weeks and it feels so much better to like hold space for him. Because that's really what it is. And I had a journey one time. It was actually a couple months before he was born. And ironically, it was at the end of it. And it was a bunch of our guy friends. And we did hop at the end, which is, get grounded, coming to an end. How do you do? But that was actually like, it ended up being very, very painful for me. It was the most physical discomfort I've probably ever been in. I was literally like curled up in a ball on the floor, writhing in pain. But what it like essentially was me as a kid sobbing and unable to communicate what I'm feeling. And so every time I just come back to that, I'm like, he literally has no ability to regulate his system. And he's looking to me to like hold space and not lose my shit. So then he can feel safe with that. And so I just go back to that. Because I obviously don't remember, I consciously don't remember as a baby, but as an adult, I remember sobbing, laying on the floor, like not able to communicate what I'm feeling. So it's like I can somewhat relate to that now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because that's one of the things, my kids much older, it was a couple of years ago. I think the two boys were kind of yelling at each other. We were out on the basketball court and I could feel myself getting dysregulated and elevated. And it occurred to me, it's like, why am I so uncomfortable with this? They can work this out. I don't need to come in and be the arbiter of what's right and wrong. This is part of their experience. And so it was like the first time I was able to step back and say, I actually don't need to do anything except sit with my own discomfort.
Yeah. Which is hard.
It was hard, and I don't always do it. But I'm much better at it now than I was before because conflict is such an important part of their learning. So just to be able to, as you said, like hold space for them, sorting it out and not having to have someone come in and or referee, to a large degree, which I think a lot of parents do.
Yeah. And again, I'm not an expert. I'm 3.5 months in, but it feels good so far. And of course, there's going to be new lessons, and I'm happy to learn those. And I think that's another thing that's helped us too is like just practicing like non-resistance. Just be like, yeah, like just going with it and like surrendering and not trying to like fix it or force anything.
Yeah, this is just what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's been maybe the biggest challenge so far?
The past 2 weeks, like what I mentioned of, is he's changed. So like before, literally, I was able to just like lay him on my chest and he'd fall asleep, like just easy. And now, like he doesn't like laying in a certain ways, and he definitely fusses more. So he's just changing his preferences, I guess, and he's having a hard time going to sleep. So like what I mentioned of him, just like sobbing for 20 or 30 minutes was really, really hard for me. And then at times, like, of course, I'm losing my thing. Like, what the hell? Like, just go to sleep.
Yeah.
Like, nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
But that's definitely been the hardest thing and biggest lesson.
Which is a great metaphor for, in my 19 years as a parent, like they're always going to change. What worked today may not work tomorrow to help regulate them. Mm. Yeah, you're learning early, brother. You're paying attention to it. It's very cool.
Yeah.
But one of the main things that you're working on right now is your fear alchemy course and the kind of the associated things that are going along with that. Let's unpack that a little bit. What exactly is it?
Mm-hmm.
How did it come to be? Why is this part of your superpower? That's how I've always known you.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you asking about it. And it started, someone actually, I think, asked me recently, they're like, because on Instagram, my handle is the fear guy. And someone was like, were you always the fear guy? And I laughed just because I'm like, that's such like a silly name. And then it's like, I mean, yes, but also no. Like I remember one of the first instances, like viscerally I had with fear was in high school. So I'm not sure if you knew this. Did you know I used to do music? Like I used to be
No.
in a rap group. So I could show you a video after this.
Damn.
But so I first got into it in high school, and so someone asked me to perform at an assembly, and I'd never done it before. And I remember right when she asked me to perform at it, like I felt just so scared, but so lit up in my body. And I wanted to say no, but the words out of my mouth were, yes, I'll do it. And so that's just a sneak peek of my relationship with fear of like, yes, I'm terrified, but because I'm terrified, I know I should do it. And for whatever reason, we were talking about human design before we started recording. Like, even if you look at my human design, there's some gifts and channels and things in my chart that actually are more attuned to seeing fear for what it is, meaning like I still feel it because I'm human, but it's like it doesn't like overwhelm or overtake my body. It's like I'm literally able to see it as like a separate entity. And so it's, and then I read a book when I was 19. Do you know the 48 Laws of Power?
I've heard of it.
So it's by Robert Greene.
Yep.
And then he rewrote a sequel with the rapper 50 Cent, and it's called the 50th Law.
No.
And so because I was into hip hop, my friend gave me this book for my 19th birthday, and I just fell in love with the concept, which is essentially just the key to 50 Cent success is fearlessness. And I kind of knew it like subconsciously, but when I read the words, I was like, oh, this just makes sense that anything I'm afraid of, I should do. And so at that point, I started to do everything I was afraid of. So at that point, at 19, white kid from Salt Lake City, Utah, I entered a rap contest in Brooklyn, New York. Like no business being there. And like seriously, I was like so scared to do it, but I was excited. And that's how I knew like to follow that feeling. Now I know, right? It's like I know fear is a compass taking me to my next level of expansion. But at that time, I was just like, oh, I got to do it. And so I just kept following that feeling, whether it was in music, whether it was in school, whether it was at work. Once I started work climbing the corporate ladder, and it's just started to pay off. And so, and then eventually in 2020, so in 2019, I quit my job, and I was a director at a finance company, and I quit simply similar reason because I was scared. But when I quit, I literally had no business income.
And you were scared because you were like cutting off the finances, right?
Yeah, that's the main purpose. And for me, I didn't have it. It was delusional. Like I didn't have any business revenue and I didn't have a plan. But fortunately for me, I did have crypto income. Fast forward 4 months later, after I quit, that crypto income was gone, and I actually lost my investment because it was a scam.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gave me the courage to take the leap. And then it gave me the perspective to essentially what I say, find my purpose, which was fear, because how I operate in the unknown is much different from what I've observed. Like I feel pretty safe in it and taken care of and trusting. And so you fast forward it into 2019, there's a bunch of synchronistic events that happen. And then like literally right as the same time, the world shuts down to, you know, a pandemic, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
due to fear. Like literally, that's when I rebrand my business, and it was crazy. Like it literally, like I truly believe it happened for me, and then that opened to all these people like wanting to learn about themselves, and so like I signed 4 clients the first week. Like I didn't realize, like I had such an icky feeling towards coaching, but I didn't realize that I was coaching people for, almost a decade as a manager. But now this is much more helpful. So that long story like just brought me to 2020. And then over the past 2.5, 3 years, I've essentially have what I say been given a grant from the universe. You know how like PhD students get grants to study things? Like I've literally just been able to study fear. Um, and so I've essentially discovered the 10 foundational fears that people deal with. And then so I put them into the course. And then in Fear Alchemy, the course, um, it's self-guided and it's immersive. You are able to discover what your fear is, and then you get to the root of it. And then I give you a step-by-step process how to essentially reprogram that or repurpose it.
So walk me through what it may look like for someone who signs up.
So essentially, so they sign up and then they start tracking their fear. Well, first step is
Yeah, and what does tracking your fear look like?
it's literally, so shout out to Boyd. It's like literally it's similar. Like you follow the signs, and it's in the sense that anytime you feel triggered, anytime you feel your system dysregulated, anytime you feel shortness of breath, anytime you feel jealous, anytime you feel angry, anytime you try and over explain yourself, like literally anything that isn't presence or love is deep down fear, because at the root is survival, right? So it's really, really simple that how I see it is that fear is at the root of all of our suffering. And so when you literally get to the root, which is survival, then it just quickly like dissolves and you're able to live more freely and more peacefully. And so they literally just start to track, when do I feel not at peace or when do I feel triggered? Keep track of that. And then they go through a process of, okay, well, what is this fear? Like, what category does it go in? Which 10? And essentially, all of the fears are interconnected anyway. They all connect to each other. And then I take them through prompts and I show them what's really cool about the course is it's intuitive, meaning it's not just listen to a dude tell you what to do. It's literally following your own process and these fill in the blank prompts. So you get your own answer. It's like you're being coached by me, but it's, on your own at a much more accessible price.
How hard is it to create a course like that? I've never done it myself, so it seems, especially if it's intuitive.
Yeah, that was the most challenging part. So, because I've coached a lot of people and I'm confident enough that like no matter who I talk to, I know I can get a breakthrough. Um, but that was the challenge for me and actually the resistance. I was like, well, how do I do it when I'm not there? And so I had essentially the layout when I started building it because I've done it with lots of people. But then it again is like, well, how do I do it if I'm not there? And then that's when I started to, for a month or two, I was just tweaking these prompts. So it helps people get to the root of like, well, why are you actually afraid? And so far, we've had results where, people with and like 5 years of therapy didn't actually know the root of the thing. They follow the prompts, they discover the reason, and then I show them how to dissolve it or get rid of it or, like what I say, remember.
And so when you get to that base fear, is it in you say it's connected to survival? Is it that the person sees it and says, "Oh, actually, I've been telling myself that this is dependent upon my survival, and it actually isn't," so it dissolves the story around it?
Yes. So yes, your people will understand that. Your listeners, like it literally can just like dissolve because our mind, right, is protecting us from something. So, for example, right, of even just like what we're talking about, like with my son, with Kingston, is like, why do I feel uncomfortable? Why am I triggered when he's crying? Oh, because I was probably told that I am not supposed to cry. Like, if I'm anything but positive and happy all the time, then I'm unworthy of love. So, my belief was if I'm not perfect, then I will be abandoned and I won't be loved. So then going through that, well, that's the root then of why I feel uncomfortable, literally, but consciously we don't know that, right? It's like, I just feel uncomfortable. Why am I uncomfortable with this? So I would track that and then I would start to go through the prompts of like, well, why do I feel uncomfortable? Oh, like I literally am so uncomfortable with this. And my fear is trying to protect me because it wants me to feel safe and loved. And then it's like, well, of course that's not true. Like, of course I can cry. Like, I'm still loved. I can show emotion. And then at that point, like if you've done some work, it's just like, oh, of course that's not true. And then one of my favorite questions to ask is just, well, what do I want to believe? Like literally, if I am God, which we are,
Yes, sir.
is I just ask, okay, instead of I'm unlovable, what would I rather believe? It's like I am infinitely lovable. Like no matter what I do, like literally I am the physical expression of love. So even if I don't believe it, I'm still loved. And so my favorite question to ask, like, what would you rather believe? Or just what do you want to believe? Is then you can actually choose that belief. And the thing that most people don't realize is that your mind is actually proving and looking and collecting the evidence to prove whatever belief you have is true. So if I believe that I'm unworthy or I'm unlovable or I'm incapable, my mind is subconsciously picking up that data to prove it is true. So that's essentially what fear alchemy is disproving what is true and remembering what is true.
Mm.
Alchemizing your fear.
Do you recommend people doing this on a daily basis? Like some people will journal and meditate daily, or is it like, how do people generally engage with the course?
Yeah, so it's online and I have a fancy guidebook for it.
Of course you do.
that was a beast to create. Like it's this comprehensive thing where it's you can print it out or just put it on your computer and just type in the prompts. And I have all the questions on there. I have all the tracking logs. You can literally just have that guidebook and you're good to go.
And what about access to you throughout the course and, for any kind of ancillary issues or?
So we have a Telegram community, which has actually blown my mind because I'm someone who tends to work by myself because I love my alone time, but not everybody is like that. And even just that aspect, right? Like that aspect is even me trying to be alone because I feel safer alone. So even that is a little bit of fear. But it's like community has shown me like what is possible, like when you share and have that experience together. So even on the way here, when I was driving to your house, someone shared like in the community that for the first time in like 2 decades, I got on a scale. Like I was so terrified because I was made fun of being chubby and fat. Like I finally have the courage to step on a scale because I know that number doesn't define me. So like literally that was just something someone shared.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're doing some important work right now.
I like to think so.
And it feels like you've got, especially engaging the community. I know that when I've done a few masterminds, there was so much that came out of just the interaction of the group outside of my kind of, direct involvement. And, probably like you, I would chime in and give my own experience, but would really let that kind of live on its own.
Yeah.
And let it guide us wherever we needed to go.
Exactly. So like my idea is like to like have it like because it's at first like part of my work through with it was like I was still using it to like what feel worthy or like my ego needed to control it still, meaning like I need to know like what breakthroughs people are having so I can feel good about myself and letting go of it. Like it's not about me, like it isn't. So this thing came through me. It's like a child in a way where it's birthed through me, but I don't own it. It's like I support it, I nourish it, I give it what it needs, and it wants to have a life on its own to like thrive. So, but the purpose of that is like, think how cool the world would be if it had less fear.
Mm.
Like if everybody felt free, if everybody could pursue their passion, if everyone felt lovable, if literally just like just that freedom feeling and that feeling of peace, like all of that is capable when fear no longer controls you, like when it truly dissolves. And so that is truly the purpose of like you can see like fear is at the root of so much control. It's at the fear of like unease. It's like it's the root of anxiety because anxiety is the expectation or the anticipation of something going wrong, which is your anxiety is fear trying to predict something so you can avoid it,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it hasn't happened yet. So that's why you feel this heart racing, like fist clenching anxiety. So it's just like this is a big thing. And I know it's bigger than me, but I'm so freaking stoked because like, oh man, like I really do just like see it. Like it's still just in its infant stages of what, not just this thing, but like using fear as medicine because I believe fear reveals where you're not free. So it goes back to just that tracking. Like you see, where do I feel fear? Boom, that's where I'm not free yet. So therefore, I follow the fear and it shows me where I don't feel safe, where I don't feel loved, where I don't feel free. And then I use that to alchemize it to therefore remember that I am.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love your awareness, where the ego kind of comes in and what I see is you got to this point of detached caring, which doesn't mean you don't care. It's just the way you feel about how the experience is going for everybody else. Everybody's outcome isn't necessarily important. It's that they're in the process and they're doing whatever they're doing, and your happiness, your feeling of worthiness isn't dependent upon them having a particular outcome.
It's taken a lot,
yeah,
to let go of that.
And I think that's something for all of us to remember. So much of what we're taught is to be outcome driven, and we lose a lot sometimes almost everything. And so being focused on something in the potential future that we have no way of predicting, but some of the sentiments you're sharing around fear showing you where you're not free, it reminds me of some of the work of Peter Crone that I've really enjoyed. Yeah, so you've studied some of his work, I take it.
He actually, so I was watching, so his first interview with Aubrey,
Yep.
like I just got chills. Like when I watched that, I was like, oh, this is what I meant to do.
Yeah.
And like literally watching that, my system downloaded like how he was guiding him and asking questions. I was like, oh, that's what I can do. And him and a guy named Kyle Cease, do you know who Kyle is?
I don't.
So anyway, but like the way that they have coached and like asked questions and like, so like for whatever reason, something just clicked. But yeah, like what does Peter say? Like life will reveal the circumstances that where you're not free.
Yeah.
Same thing, right? Is like, well, if I feel anything, like essentially it's fear.
Yeah. So like if you're looking at Instagram and something triggers you, it's like, that's good. That's your work right there. Don't stop getting on Instagram because of that.
Yep.
Use it as a tool to move through it. Side note, I had a little hand in Aubrey having the podcast with Peter. Kyle was out in LA and he had posted a picture, Kyle Kingsbury, on Instagram. There were like a bunch of people at this party he was at and Peter Crone was there. I was like, dude, that guy is fucking awesome. Like hook up with him. And so they ended up, he went on Kyle's podcast. And then after that, he went on Aubrey's. Still hasn't been on mine because he hasn't been to Austin since then, but we've been working on it. But that's a guy that I would love to have on the podcast because that is a lot of the work that you're doing as well. It's taking these things that are triggers and using them, that there's gold in them.
It's literally what it is. So, like, have you ever seen, I'm sure you have you, or you've done it yourself, Cal? Like, have you seen those old guys on the beach that with their metal detectors? This is how I view us with our triggers. We're just moseying around life, and then we hear that beep, we hear that trigger, and it's like, so something literally underneath the surface, unconsciously, it beeps, which is that trigger, and it tells us to pay attention to it, which is the gold, which is the treasure. Like literally, like it's not, it's pretty cheesy, but fear alchemy, right? Is like you're turning it into gold because it's revealing what you desire. Like if I wasn't afraid of it, I wouldn't care about it. Like back to that music example, like I'm afraid of it because I really, really want to do it. And it scares the hell out of me not to achieve it, to fail at it, So it's the same thing of like when I feel that beep, when I feel that tension or that trigger, it's like, pay attention because that's actually really important for you.
Yeah. Beautiful. Now you also do some work. You have a master class about quitting your job.
Oh, you saw that. Yeah.
Talk to me about that because that's a big thing for people, especially the way things have shifted over the last couple of years. I think you would agree. There is a kind of narrative out there by people who I wouldn't necessarily follow their advice. We're like, quit your job and follow your passion. And like, it's that simple and it's just not. So I'm guessing that your masterclass is probably a little bit more involved than that.
Yeah. So I got out of a business partnership a couple months ago. And when I was re-entering the one-on-one coaching world, I was like, what is the actual result and the feeling that people are looking for? Like I used to just say fear to freedom, and that's great. And if that resonates with you, like for sure, come on. But like I started to look at the results I was supporting people in, and about half of them had left their job, which is actually crazy. And I didn't realize that. And it's such an important part of my journey. And like you said, over the past couple of years, like there's so many people waking up to their gifts, to their purpose, to their passion. Like you're not supposed to be just like stuck in this soul sucking thing that you're in. Like I went to the county tax office yesterday and
damn.
And like, it's a nice brand new building, but again, they could be happy with their jobs. But like, I was just looking at that and I was like, man, like just this box. And I was like, I'm so happy I don't have to do this every day anymore. So yes. So the masterclass is essentially, so it's five things you need to know before quitting your job. which is like what I wish I knew. Because when I did it, I literally, and it depends how you learn, right? Everyone's different. For me, even again, back to human design, is like I'm literally supposed to learn by experiencing. Is like, yes, give me some things in a book, but I want to do the thing. And so for me, it was helpful. Like I've learned on the go, but I wish somebody would have even just said, hey, Ben, don't invest so much into this thing before you know it works. Like just test the product. Like that's such a basic business thing of like, are people buying it? Are people resonating with it? So just like the, most viable product of just testing, like, does it work? Does it make sense? Are people resonating with it? Which I didn't do. I literally quit like having this idea that wasn't making any money. Like for me, I know it happened on purpose because I had to clear out everything. I had to leave everything behind that wasn't working so I could find what would be my thing. Because again, holding on to that comfort or that certainty, you have to let go of what's old. You have to make space for it. And so for me, is that unknown place was literally like not just for me, but everything that we want to create is in the unknown. Like we can't create any something new from what is now because it's old. That's like what we know. So we have to let go and like venture into what feels unsafe or unknown.
Where do people get really hung up as you're taking them through a process of leaving their current job?
Yeah, it's mostly money where it's like it's that stable paycheck. It's like, well, I get paid every 2 weeks. And I mean, you know this. It's like, and I definitely know this. It's like when you are your own source of income is you could go a month, you could go 2 months, you could go 3 months, you could go longer, So it's relieving that stableness or that stability or that reliability is terrifying. And so the antidote to that for me, one helpful aspect is you are the corporation or the company isn't your source of prosperity, which like you are, right? Like if you didn't show up to that company, if you didn't have the skills, if you didn't have the expertise, if you didn't have the experience, you wouldn't get paid for that job. So it's the same thing that you'll receive abundance or money for on the other side. It's like it's you. Like I know it doesn't feel that way because companies are putting money into our bank accounts, but like literally they're doing it because you are the thing that's providing the service. So it's this, you just flip it as like the same thing will happen, but it's much more fun. It's much more fulfilling when it's something like for me, collecting debt versus helping people free them from their fear. It's a much different feeling, but it's terrifying.
Yeah, and give me an example of how you've taken someone through that and what it looks like to, you know, continue with your old job for a period of time, like have one foot in that space and then another foot in the exploring.
Yeah. So it's like, it all depends. Like when people ask about money, it's like, the question is like, how much do I need to have saved typically? And like, if you Google it, Google will say like 6 months, but it's all dependent on you, which I would just say, well, how much do you need to feel safe? Because that's what it is, right? Money, like, yes, we need it to live. But besides, when all your needs are met, money is now like a feeling of safety or success or importance or power or whatever you associate with that. So it's, well, how much do I need just to feel safe in that or to feel secure? And then from that aspect, it's, yeah, you begin testing. Like if you just don't want to leave. But here's the thing though, Cal, like the truth is that once someone commits to it, the universe will make it happen. I forgot this exact quote, but it's, that nature loves courage or the universe rewards bravery. Meaning, like, once you decide that this is the thing and you take that leap off the cliff, like, you're going to be caught. Meaning, it's like, it might not happen in the way that you think it will.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one person I supported, she came to me and she was like, she wanted to leave her job, but she didn't know how she was going to do it or, like the actual how. That's usually how people get stuck
Yeah.
is the how. And what happened though is all we did was help her with like nervous system regulation and feeling safe and confident in herself and trusting herself. Because what is the quote that like, um, the bird isn't afraid of the branch breaking because it's not relying on the branch, it's relying on its own wings.
Mm.
Something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I'm not afraid if I get let go, if I get fired because I trust myself. So that's really what it's about is it's not like, yes, there's a mix of strategy and all that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really of like, do you trust in yourself? And with this person, ironically, because she didn't get vaccinated, they actually let her go. So she was going to be let go no matter what, but working together, she actually got prepared for it. And she was like, oh, like this just naturally happened for me. And now, like, sweet, I get severance too. And now I get to like work on my business and all the things at the same time.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Joe Dispenza. Just let go of the how and the when, and just and I guess the piece that is missing in that is to create the safety and the trust in your own kind of experience. Hey, Enzo. That's okay, buddy. That's the first time. I think this is the fourth or fifth podcast. First time he's made a peep. Not a boy. We had a little someone going by the window. I want to shift gears a little bit because we were talking about before. Hey, you got a new kid now. What's a typical day look? Today's pretty busy. And I've got this podcast, and you have. I know you have a call later, and you had something else. You had 3 things on your schedule, and which I appreciated because you said it's a busy day, and most people look at you like, dude, what the fuck? Like that's nothing.
Yep.
And again, it's just a changing people's perspective on what kind of owning the calendar looks like. And I was on a podcast recently, and the host asked me, what's success to you?
Mm.
And I said, it's owning my calendar.
Mm.
And, I've really been orienting. I thought I had a really strong grip on that. And I realized kind of over the summer that I didn't. And so I've really been intentional about creating that schedule that really supports the life I want to live and that, of my family and the people around me. So I'm curious about what that evolution has been like for you and why it's so important.
That's a good question. When I was thinking about this the other day, I finally feel like I love it. And I know this comes up frequently with you, unlearned, with like the corporate way, which like usually when we leave our job, right, is like, we will then recreate what we knew because that's what we're familiar with. And so,
Yeah, there's a weird kind of safety in that familiarity. Yeah,
exactly. Right. Because it's, well, what do I do with the space? Am I worthy? Am I doing enough? Yeah. Like literally we associate so much with doing and achieving. So it's like, well, if I have space in my calendar, am I not, doing anything? Am I not climbing and progressing? So the truth is, the funny thing, Kyle, is like, I've always been this way, even in the corporate world. Like this goes back to like just how I'm built is like, I would do things differently. Like one boss one time got mad at me because I wasn't mad. Like we didn't hit our quarterly number or something like that. And
and you were throwing shit and
yeah, he was mad that I wasn't mad. And so I remember, like, I still remember that. Like, that's just so funny to me because I knew I was like, this doesn't matter. Like, yes, this matters to the company. And
he looked at it like you didn't care, and you're like, you were already in acceptance of it. He's like,
yes,
the quarter's over. We didn't meet it.
now
What am I
moving
going to do?
forward.
Just bitch about it, or just we'll work harder, or whatever?
Exactly. And so that's just how I viewed it. And like doing different, like with all my teams, like even if I led like a team of like 150 people, I had a goal of meeting with each employee like once a month, just to like, how are you? How's your life? you know, instead of just like, get this done. But it's like, so with the schedule, that's one thing I remember I'm not sure if it was a department or a company wide thing that I encourage, like, let's remove meetings, which is not something that most people, that's like, what is the purpose of this? And so back to the unlearning ways though, is like, I finally have felt more comfortable and confident in like, oh, this is me. And actually this is what everybody wants. And so if I want to be an example, then I need to own it and like truly enjoy it. And ironically, this kind of ties into what we've been talking about. And I'm interested to see how you feel about this. And I actually was going to ask you before we started recording, but I guess I wasn't supposed to ask you until now.
Yeah.
All right. Is like the whole aspect of like, have a fear of feeling good. Meaning, if there's no stress, if there's no conflict, if there's no chaos, if we grew up in, like, I can only imagine if someone's on like the Wall Street stock exchange, like floor, they are always buzzing. Like, and if they're not, they probably feel unsafe. And even if it's destroying their health and their happiness, that's not what they know. So they will self sabotage once they feel peace, once they feel space, once they feel happiness. That once they, like, that's part of self sabotage, right? Is like once you start to leave that comfort zone, is like it'll pull you back to whatever feels comfortable. So that's what I've started to do with my schedule. Is like I'm finally really starting to break away and feel comfortable with that. And so that's what I was curious for you too, of like that, like, do you feel, and I kind of asked you about that, like that buzz or that stress too. Like, do you feel like that's been part of it? Is like, oh, like peacefulness feels wrong in any way?
Yeah, great question. I would say there is an element to the adrenaline
Yeah,
of being
adrenaline.
on the floor that is addictive. And I think that's why so many people, when they leave the trading floor or they leave professional sports, they're searching for something to give them that high.
Yes.
I feel like I manage that pretty well, relatively speaking. There's a part of me that still enjoys that. There's a part of me that finds it in other ways, whether it's in engaging in different investments or, in some ways sitting down for a podcast, I get really fired up about that, so that's me kind of tapping into something that's meaningful for me. That's not maybe destructive, which is where it
Yeah.
can lead to, right? If you're searching for that, finding that high again, some people literally just go to drugs, and they'll do it while they're in that job as well. I wouldn't say drugs were rampant on the trading floor. Although I would also assert that the guys that I traded with in my firm weren't into that.
Mm.
There were guys outside our firm that were, and there were probably a lot more than I was just privy to because I didn't necessarily hang out with them. I didn't know what their kind of the day-to-day kind of, usage was. But I do think it creates a huge void for people. And if they're not okay with that, then it gets into some really self-destructive behavior, chasing that high.
Mhm.
And I guess I was fortunate to have been brought up in a firm that had great leadership, and I became part of that leadership. But the DNA of that firm was a guy named Will Hobart, and that's just not how he rolled when he was home. He really compartmentalized work, and that was a thing that we were doing to make money and, act in integrity and all that and be part of a team. But that wasn't why he was on this earth. He was here to be a part of a family, his own family and this family that he created on the trading floor. And so we always had that kind of ethos within our company. And I think a lot of us were able to carry that on into our families and see that trading was great and it was a great means of potential financial resources, but it wasn't why we were on earth. Which is cool because it's, as you can imagine, it's pretty rare in that business to have someone like that. And I was fortunate enough to find my way to Will. But yeah, I think it's, it's challenging for a lot of people. I'll just say men in particular who have been brought up on this idea of productivity and having their self-esteem, their worthiness, their self-worth tied directly to what they're able to produce.
Mm-hmm.
There are still elements of that for me that I'm unpacking. It's not maybe as prevalent as it was years ago, but it's still there. It's part of my patterning. And when I look really closely, I can see it. I don't think it's as problematic as it could be, but there are times when, we were talking about earlier, like how I've been really shifting my time over the past several months because in some way, I got very involved in a lot of the investments I was doing and some other things. And it was pulling me away from the things that are really important to me, particularly my family and relationships. And I know that there's some element of me still trying to prove myself.
Yeah, and like me too. Like, and I don't think that's wrong because I think some of that is actually helpful,
Agreed.
And it's like, but it's obviously if it's completely, I don't know, but like speaking from my own experience, like letting go of it more and more is actually, I've seen more quote unquote success happen for whatever reason, Cal. Like I've tried to do things quote unquote not the old way, like just how, like what we're talking about getting out of the stress or the strategy, either super hard work or the full calendar. I've tried to do it, but it literally, it's, when you go to a web page and it says like 404 error,
Yeah.
that's what it
Yeah.
happens for me. It's like, it doesn't work. And I've fought that for a long time and I still am, but I'm letting go of it more and more and more of like this new way of like, we can just be ourselves. Like that's enough. And like this offering is that like that's what I hope people find is like all you have to do is be you. And it's for me, the learning that I've learning with this is like even that within myself, like it's medicine for me over and over. Like like what I mentioned before about like using it to like try and prove something about me of like like sales goals, for example, right? Like I was like, I need to sell this much by this date, which isn't wrong. Goals are helpful at some point. But interestingly enough, right, like goal setting can sometimes setting up like disappointment.
Yeah. Are you tied to the outcome?
Yeah, that I'm tied to the outcome instead of now what I'm like, and like, I'm like, I've done the work. This is going to happen exactly the way it needs to happen. I'm going to listen to source and take the inspired action that I'm guided to. So like I am so executed oriented, like I'll take action all day. Like boom, like give me the rock and I'll go. But it's like now I'm like, okay, like where can I just listen? And this is funny. I'm using a football analogy, I guess, right? Of like, am I running straight into like a clogged up hole or am I pausing for a second and looking for like the opening where I can run through? So I guess that's what it is more so now of like, okay, I know I'm ready to take action when needed, but I'm waiting and listening to when that opening is. So I can not only help me and my family, but it can be of the greatest service to all. So it's detaching from the outcome and of like, God or the universe isn't like, Ben, you better hit, 100 core cells in the first hour, or it's you suck,
Yeah.
It's like so one thing I've started to think is I'm seeing with God's eyes of like, can I see this not from just a limited human perspective, but some like be open to like the bigger plan that I'm not in control of.
Yeah. And I actually love the football analogy because it reminds me of this idea of when we set a goal, sometimes we're just so tunnel visioned on that goal and we're missing everything that's going on around us in different ways that we can actually get to a level of achievement that not only hits that particular goal, but surpasses it. It opens our aperture up to so many more things. And when we are present, we pick up these things. And when we're present on the football field, instead of just running where I'm supposed to run,
Yeah.
If I just pause a little bit, you see the great running backs who can just do that. And it's amazing. They have a sense of
Vision.
where it's supposed to be. And then intuitively, it's like, boom, they bounce it outside, in reverse course. And all of a sudden they've gone for 25 yards or whatever. Right. And I think I think it's a great analogy for just, having a plan, but not being so wedded to it that we lose, the perspective of what is actually happening all around us.
Yeah. I like how you use the word aperture. I'm not sure if you use that word frequently.
No, I don't.
But just as far as like even like the camera example, right? But that's just cool, like because you can literally see it just like open it and widen. I like that.
Yeah. It's been a while since I used it. I'm glad I think I used it properly.
Thanks for busting it out.
Yeah. Where do you where do you want Fear Alchemy and the rest of what you're here to do? Where do you see that going?
I mean, that's such a good question, right? Is like because it has to do just with what we talked about. And
Yeah, what's your dream for it?
dude, this is a great question. Is like it's a nuanced question because I have the dream where it's like helping thousands, like, and then it's like, well, why just thousands? Why not tens of thousands? Why not hundreds of thousands? Why not millions? But again, letting go of the how of the when. So I see it like it's so much bigger than just me. And it's brand new. Like this, it's an infant in the world.
Yeah,
So
you're still burping it, changing its diapers. Yeah.
yeah, it's still spitting.
It's not talking back to you yet. Wait for that.
That's funny. So yeah, but then like at the same time is like allowing it to be bigger than just what I see. So I have the football in my arm, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe not even yet. Maybe we're just stepping on the field, Cal. Maybe I just know there's finally a game.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know a good metaphor to tie that
You're
in.
going through the draft right now and you're selecting your team.
Yeah. We'll take it even back. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and like, yeah, but truly is like I have this feeling and this vision of waking up and seeing so many people sign up for it that I'm just like bawling.
Yeah.
And yes, like the money and the success, like validation, all of that is in that too. But more so just like, holy cow, like, what does that mean with when all these people are equipped to free themselves from fear? Ooh, I'm just getting goosebumps, dude. Like that, bro. Like that's the dream.
It reminds me of when my website went live and I had podcasts on there. It felt like such a long journey. Started even long before I was going to do a podcast, and it like happened and I just was overcome with emotions and I had no idea that was going to happen. And it was so cool.
See,
you know?
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? Like just those moments.
Yeah.
I love that.
What is your biggest fear around this, this kind of dream?
It's definitely like, so specifically with this, because there's fear that I'm always uncovering or unlayering, and there's new levels and layers always revealing themselves. But specifically with this is like it not that it doesn't produce results for people, but that it's not as big as I hope it can be. Meaning like not that many people sign up but really what that means about me that I've discovered is that like it's going to require more from me. Meaning more response like I'm going to have to require myself to be seen more. That's what my fear is with it is like then you're going to feel vulnerable because there's going to be so many eyes on it that it's going to be like that's going to make you feel nervous and vulnerable. So for me is like that failure, but really it's actually like a fear of success because then I'll be more seen and have more eyes on me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. Not to judge it at all, but I appreciate that. I want to wrap with this. On Instagram, you used the word magician.
I just changed that recently. I was like, oh, that's fun.
Yeah, tell me about that.
That's funny, dude. I love it. So yeah, on Instagram, you can choose what your occupation is or whatever. And it used to be, I didn't used to have one. And then I had coach. And I was like, no, that's too boring. So I think a week or two, I changed it to magician because it was like, this is just so funny.
What's
like,
mine? Is mine coach? My thing on Instagram, my label, whatever. I haven't even looked.
Look.
Lindsay will check it out.
Yeah. But that's the thing is like, it's a label. I was like, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess we're all choosing our label because we're always choosing everything. But it's for me, it's like, oh, like I am a magician. It's like alchemizing or transforming or transmuting that fear. It feels like magic, right? It's like, whoa, like I used to be so afraid of this thing. And now it's actually like motivating me. But like the funny thing about magic, ooh, what is this quote? Is that magic is the name of science that we don't understand yet. So that's actually not magic. It's just we don't know how to compute it and analyze it yet. Right. Is like, and that's what the true alchemists know. Like if you study a true alchemy when it began, right, is like they're turning base metals into gold, like lead into gold. And back then it seemed like magic, but really it was just chemistry. So that's what I believe the same thing is like it might seem like magic, but it's actually just a simple process that you just have to become aware of and learn. And then you're able to do it over and over again. And that's what I hope people to give the tools, like not just like knowledge, like no, like what is this actual tool that you can use over and over and over and over again and come back to? So you're actually changing your life, not just saying it or talking about it or listening to a podcast, but actually like, how is my life different? And that's what I hope to deliver.
I love that. Yeah. All right. Where can people find the course? Where can they find you? All that good stuff.
All the good stuff. So Instagram, the fear guy, was where you can find the magician, I guess. If I haven't changed it by the time you're listening. And then the website is feeling-free.com. And that's where you can find the course.
Awesome.
Feeling free, baby. I know you like that one.
Yes, sir. Dude, thanks for coming on. It's been great.
Cal, thank you. Like I deeply appreciate it on a deep soul heart level. So thank you, brother.
Yeah.